The knock at my door wasn't urgent. It was confident. The kind of knock that assumes compliance before the door even opens. 3 sharp raps, evenly spaced, followed by the sound of someone shifting their weight like they owned the porch. I looked at the security monitor before moving, more out of habit than concern. 2 men stood outside in dark uniforms, badges on their chests, utility belts. One had his hand resting near a radio, like he'd practiced the pose. A third figure waited near an unmarked sedan at the curb, engine idling. They looked official to anyone who didn't know better. I did. I opened the door slowly, keeping my expression neutral. Before I could say a word, the taller one stepped forward and announced they were authorized enforcement officers responding to a complaint. He said my name like it was already written on paperwork somewhere. Said there were serious violations. Said I was being ordered to step outside. No greeting. No explanation. Straight to authority. That was the first red flag. Real officers don't start with commands unless there's a reason. Real authority doesn't need to rush. And real law enforcement definitely doesn't introduce itself using vague titles and borrowed confidence. They claimed the HOA had requested my arrest for repeated noncompliance, obstruction, and interference with community governance. They said if I didn't cooperate immediately, the situation would escalate. I let them talk. People pretending to have power always reveal themselves if you give them enough rope. Their uniforms were close but wrong. The patches used outdated terminology. The badges weren't department-issued. One man's radio was clipped upside down. Another kept glancing sideways like he was waiting for a cue. I asked a simple question. Which department? They exchanged a look. Just for a fraction of a second. Then one of them answered with the name of a private security firm. Strike 1. I asked who authorized the arrest. They said the HOA president. Strike 2. I asked under what statute an HOA could order an arrest. That's when the confidence cracked. The taller one raised his voice slightly, trying to reassert control. He said I was being difficult. He said refusal would be documented. He said I was hindering enforcement. That word again. Enforcement. It's amazing how often people misuse it when they don't actually have it. I stepped just far enough outside that they could see my badge clipped discreetly inside my jacket. Not flashed. Not shoved in their faces. Just visible enough to change the room. Their posture shifted instantly. The man nearest the door went rigid. The one by the car stopped pretending to look casual. The taller one's mouth opened slightly before he caught himself. I hadn't said anything yet. I didn't need to. Because the badge wasn't decorative. It wasn't symbolic. It wasn't something I ordered online to scare people. It represented years of service, authority earned the hard way, and a deep understanding of how badly things can go when someone pretends to be law enforcement. I finally spoke. You're trespassing, I said calmly. And you're impersonating officers. Both of those are serious problems. They tried to recover. Claimed it was a misunderstanding. Said they were just following instructions. Said we could clear it up if I came with them. That's when I knew the HOA had made a catastrophic mistake. Because this wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a test. And they had just failed it at my front door. What happened next would dismantle every ounce of authority they thought they had, and expose how fragile fake power really is. The moment they realized the badge was real, the entire energy on my porch shifted. Authority, when it's fake, is loud. When it's real, it doesn't need to raise its voice. And standing there in front of my door, those men suddenly understood they were completely out of their depth. The taller one cleared his throat and tried to regain control. He adjusted his stance, squared his shoulders, and said they were acting under HOA instruction and that I should still cooperate to avoid complications. His words sounded rehearsed now, fragile, like a script falling apart. I asked for their names. They hesitated. I asked for identification numbers. One of them reached toward his pocket, then stopped halfway, realizing whatever he pulled out would only make things worse. That's when I knew this had gone far beyond a simple HOA dispute. These weren't overzealous security guards. They were people willing to impersonate law enforcement and threaten an arrest on private property because someone in an HOA told them to. I stepped fully onto the porch, keeping my hands visible, my voice steady. "Let me be very clear," I said. "You are not law enforcement. You have no authority here. And everything you've said since you stepped onto my property is being recorded." The man by the car swallowed hard. He glanced at the camera mounted above my door, then at the one near the driveway. They hadn't noticed them before. Most people don't, until it's too late. Clipboard guy tried a different approach. His tone softened. He said maybe there had been a misunderstanding. Maybe the HOA paperwork was unclear. Maybe this could be resolved with a conversation. That pivot told me everything. Threats didn't work, so now they wanted cooperation. I asked who sent them. They named the HOA president. I asked how much they were being paid. Silence. I asked if they were aware that impersonating an officer is a felony. That one landed. The taller one exhaled slowly and said, "We don't want any trouble." I nodded. "Then you should leave. Now." They didn't move right away. People like this rarely do. They wait for permission for an opening, for some signal that they can salvage dignity. They didn't get one. I repeated myself, firmer this time. "You are trespassing. Leave the property." Finally, they backed away. Not confidently. Not smoothly. They shuffled toward their vehicles like actors exiting a stage after forgetting their lines. Gravel crunched under their boots as they climbed into the SUVs, doors slamming harder than necessary. Before they pulled away, the taller one leaned out the window and said, "You'll be hearing from the HOA." I smiled for the first time. I'm counting on it. As the SUVs disappeared down the drive, I reviewed the footage immediately. Clear faces. Clear audio. Clear threats. Every angle documented. Every word preserved. That's the mistake people like them always make. They think the encounter is the end. It's just the beginning. Within an hour, emails started hitting my inbox. Urgent. Immediate action required. Failure to comply. The HOA president wanted a meeting. She wanted clarification. She wanted control back. I didn't respond. Because when entitled people realize intimidation failed, they escalate. And escalation creates evidence. By that evening, neighbors were texting. Someone had seen the SUVs. Someone else heard the rumor that the HOA tried something stupid. Fear was already shifting directions. The HOA thought they were enforcing rules. What they were actually doing was building a case against themselves. By the next morning, the HOA's panic had fully set in. My inbox was flooded with emails, each one more aggressive than the last. Subject lines screamed authority, final warning, immediate compliance required, legal action pending. The language was carefully chosen to intimidate, but the desperation underneath was obvious. I didn't reply. Silence is unsettling to people who rely on control. When you don't push back emotionally, they start exposing themselves. Then the calls began. Board members. The HOA president. Someone claiming to be their legal advisor. Each message urged me to resolve this quietly and warned that outside involvement would complicate things. They were right about one thing. It would. I spent the morning organizing evidence. Security footage from the porch and driveway. Audio recordings of the threats. Screenshots of emails. HOA documents showing jurisdiction boundaries that stopped well short of my property. Everything labeled. Everything time-stamped. By early afternoon, I contacted my department, not to ask for favors, but to follow protocol. Impersonation of law enforcement isn't an HOA issue. It's a criminal one. When a real officer arrived to review the materials, the difference was immediate. Calm. Professional. No raised voices. No threats. Just facts and questions. When he watched the footage of the fake officers announcing an arrest, his expression hardened. "That's a problem," he said flatly. He took copies of everything. Within hours, the HOA president sent another email, this one to the entire neighborhood. She claimed there had been a miscommunication and blamed a third-party security contractor for overstepping. She insisted no arrest had ever been authorized and asked residents to remain calm. The problem was, everyone had already seen the footage. Neighbors started replying, asking questions. forwarding old emails where the HOA threatened enforcement, towing, and police involvement. One resident shared a notice that looked almost identical to mine. Another admitted they'd paid fines they never questioned. The illusion cracked. That evening, a board member resigned. Then another. One sent a private apology, admitting they'd raised concerns before and been ignored. The HOA president called me directly. Her tone was different now, tight, controlled, careful. She said she wanted to clear the air and suggested we meet privately to avoid misunderstandings. I declined. I don't meet privately with people who send fake officers to my home, I said. There was a long pause. Then she asked a question that told me everything. What do you want? That's always the question entitled people ask when they realize they've lost power. They assume everything has a price. I answered honestly. I want you to stop. Another pause. Longer this time, because stopping meant admitting what they'd done. And admission was something she wasn't prepared for. By the end of the night, the HOA website went offline. Notices were quietly removed from common areas. A scheduled meeting was abruptly canceled due to unforeseen circumstances. Control was slipping. The fallout began quietly, then all at once. The next morning, bright violation notices appeared across the neighborhood, but not on my property this time. They were taped to bulletin boards, mail kiosks, and lampposts like a last gasp of authority. Words like enforcement suspended and temporary administrative pause were printed in bold, legal-sounding fonts meant to calm people down. They had the opposite effect. Residents took photos. Screenshots circulated. People compared notes. And for the first time, the HOA's version of reality was being openly questioned. By noon, I received a certified letter, not from the HOA, but from the city. It acknowledged a formal investigation into impersonation of law enforcement, harassment, and fraudulent enforcement actions connected to the association. It also instructed the HOA to cease all enforcement activity immediately. That single page erased their power. The HOA president sent one final mass email trying to frame the situation as a misunderstanding. She claimed the officers were contractors acting independently and that no arrest had ever been authorized. She urged calm, patience, and trust in the board. Trust was gone. Neighbors began replying publicly. One shared a threatening voicemail. Another posted an email demanding fines under threat of police involvement. Someone else uploaded a copy of a notice referencing detainment for noncompliance. The pattern was undeniable. By mid-afternoon, 2 more board members resigned. The HOA's bank account was frozen pending review. Vendors stopped returning calls. The management company distanced itself entirely. When actual detectives arrived to follow up, they didn't need much from me. The evidence was already clear. Fake uniforms, fake badges, written threats, recorded statements, a clean timeline showing intent. The HOA president didn't show up to the interview. By evening, a for sale sign appeared in her yard. The neighborhood watched quietly as the person who once controlled everything disappeared behind closed doors and packed boxes. No shouting. No confrontation. Just consequences unfolding in real time. The HOA office went dark. The website stayed offline. Meetings were canceled indefinitely. Authority, once loud and aggressive, evaporated the moment it was exposed to scrutiny. People knocked on my door that night, not to argue, but to thank me. Some admitted they'd been afraid for years. Afraid of fines. Afraid of threats. Afraid of exactly the kind of intimidation I'd shut down. I told them the truth. It only works if everyone believes it. By the time the sun set, the HOA wasn't enforcing rules anymore. It was defending itself. The official end didn't come with sirens or speeches. It arrived in silence. 3 weeks later, a final notice was mailed to every homeowner. Plain envelope. City seal. Inside was a short statement confirming what everyone already knew. The HOA had been dissolved pending criminal and civil proceedings. Its authority was revoked. Its contracts voided. Its records seized. Just like that, it was over. No more fines slipped under doors. No more threatening emails written in bold red text. No more strangers in fake uniforms pretending to carry power they never had. The neighborhood exhaled all at once, like people stepping out of a room that had been filled with smoke for years. The former HOA president was charged with impersonation of law enforcement, fraud, and coercion. 2 board members accepted plea deals. The officers turned out to be private security hires who admitted they were instructed to look official and intimidate residents into compliance. Every lie unraveled cleanly when it hit the light. The civil suits followed fast. Refunds were issued. Liens were removed. Foreclosures quietly reversed. Families who had almost lost their homes were made whole again. It didn't fix everything, but it fixed enough. The neighborhood changed after that. People started talking to each other instead of whispering. Kids played outside without parents worrying someone would call enforcement over chalk drawings. Trash cans stayed where they belonged. Doors stayed open longer. Power returned to where it should have always been, with the people who actually lived there. As for me, life went back to normal. No interviews. No victory laps. Just quiet mornings and friendly waves. A few neighbors still joked about the day the fake cops showed up, but even that became more story than memory. One night, a man knocked on my door. He introduced himself as someone who'd lived 3 houses down for years. We'd never spoken before. He said, "I just wanted to thank you. You stood up when nobody else thought they could." I told him the same thing I'd told everyone. I didn't do anything special. I just didn't let them bluff. That's the thing about fake authority. It only survives on fear. The moment someone asks for credentials, jurisdiction, and truth, it collapses under its own weight. The HOA believed badges could replace legitimacy, that uniforms could override the law, that intimidation could stand in for consent. They were wrong, and the lesson spread far beyond our street. Other neighborhoods reached out. Other boards went quiet. Management companies rewrote policies overnight. Everyone suddenly remembered the difference between real power and pretend control. Months later, the old HOA office reopened as a community space. Folding chairs, bulletin board, a sign-up sheet for potlucks instead of penalties. No president, no board, just neighbors figuring things out like adults. That was the real ending. Not punishment, not revenge. Freedom.